Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Madhav Jaya Ashta Sakhi Jaya Nrsingadev Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Panchatattva Jaya Panchatattva Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Gurudev Jaya Gurudev Jai Shri Radha Madhava Ashtasakhi Vrinda Shriman Mahaprabhu ki Shri Nrsingadev Bhagavan ki Bhaktaraj Prahlad Maharaj ki Ananta Deva ki Shri Panchatattva ki Shri La Prabhupada ki Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Ajnanatimirannasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha मुखाकरोति वाचालं पंगोरं गायते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरो दिनतारिणं परमानन्दमाधवं श्रीचैतन्य ईश्वरं नमः। ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते जयपताकस्वामिनिति नामिने नमाचार्यपादाय निताय कृपप्रदायिने गौरकथा दामदाय नगरग्रामतारिणे नमः। ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वतीदेवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। श्रीमद् भागवतम की, श्रील प्रभुपाद की। Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 12, Text 48. śabda-brahmātmanas tasya vyaktāvyaktātmanaḥ paraḥ brahmāvabhāti vitato nānā-śakty-upabṛṁhitaḥ nānā-śakty-upabṛṁhitaḥ śabda-brahmātmanas tasya vyaktāvyaktātmanaḥ paraḥ brahmāvabhāti vitato nānā-śakty-upabṛṁhitaḥ śabda-brahmātmanas. One more time. śabda-brahmātmanas tasya vyaktāvyaktātmanaḥ paraḥ brahmāvabhāti vitato nānā-śakti-upabṛṁhitaḥ. śabda-brahmātmanas tasya vyaktāvyaktātmanaḥ paraḥ brahmāvabhāti vitato nānā-śakti-upabṛṁhitaḥ. śabda-brahmātmanas tasya vyaktāvyaktātmanaḥ paraḥ brahmāvabhāti vitato nānā-śakti-upabṛṁhitaḥ. brahmātmanas tasya bhāti vitato Vaishnavis? śabda-brahmātmanas tasya avyakta-ātmanaḥ paraḥ brahmāvabhāti vitato brahmātmanas tasya vyaktāvyaktātmanaḥ paraḥ brahmāvabhāti vitato nānā-śakti-upabṛṁhitaḥ śabda-brahmātmanas tasya vyaktāvyaktātmanaḥ paraḥ Word by word translation. Śabda-brahma, transcendental sound. Atmanaḥ, of the Supreme Lord. Tasya, his. Vyakta, manifested. Avyakta-ātmanaḥ, of the unmanifested. Paraḥ, transcendental. Brahmā, the absolute. Avabhāti, completely manifested. Vitataḥ, distributing. Nānā, multifarious. Śakti, energies. Upabṛṁhitaḥ, invested with. Translation. Brahmā is the personal representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the source of transcendental sound and is therefore above the conception of manifested and unmanifested. Brahmā is the complete form of the Absolute Truth and is invested with multifarious energies. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The post of Brahmā is the highest responsible post within the universe, and it is offered to the most perfect personality of the universe. Sometimes the Supreme Personality of Godhead has to become Brahmā when there is no suitable living being to occupy the post. In the material world, Brahmā is the complete representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and transcendental sound, praṇava, comes from him. He is therefore invested with multifarious energies from all the demigods, like Indra, Candra, Varuṇa are manifested. His transcendental value is not to be minimized, even though he exhibited a tendency to enjoy his own daughter. There is a purpose for the exhibition of such a tendency by Brahmā, and he is not to be condemned like an ordinary living entity. If you like to repeat the translation, Brahmā is the personal representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the source of transcendental sound and is therefore above the conception of manifested and unmanifested. Brahmā is the complete form of the Absolute Truth and is invested with multifarious energies. My dear devotees, please accept my obeisances. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Everything in this world operates under the three modes of material nature, and in my attempt to try to prepare for this class, I came to the realization that I am not in the right mode of nature to even qualify to understand what to speak of, express the intricacies of philosophical, psychological, spiritual dimensions of what this particular section of Srimad Bhagavatam has to convey to us. So I seek your blessings to have the right focus, and be, at least while I'm sitting here, try to align to the sattva guna mode and be free from any ulterior motives. So this is a controversial episode in Srimad Bhagavatam, and when we are discussing on an individual level, social level, many things come up. So everything in this world, everything, how we view this verse can also be in sattva guna, rajas guna, and tamas guna. So when things are aligned with sattva guna, there's harmony, there's clarity, and there's focus. So today I'd like us to focus on this acronym, focus. That'll be the acronym today. 5 points that we can learn from this section of Srimad Bhagavatam. Let me just open my notes. So here we see that Brahma is the personal representation of Krishna, and he's also the source of transcendental sound. So this verse here highlights how Brahma's exalted position as Krishna's representative is connected with the transcendental sound, and it's also connected to his divine purpose. So we are studying today the concepts of Brahma's superior position in spite of certain weaknesses. And what is our focus? How can we bring this section of Srimad Bhagavatam on a practical application? What should be our focus? So, in the word focus, first thing is, what is our focus? When we look at this verse, where does my fixation go upon? Each one of us have the center. Something is the center of our life. Maybe relationships, maybe money, maybe faults of other people, in my case. So, when I was looking at this verse and I'm trying to understand Brahma's role and his actions, the immediate tendency is, the psychology is to jump into condemnation, to try to see purity as, condemn something in order to derive at purity. So this controversial verse, in one sense, of Bhagavad Gita, apichetsu duracharo, this verse actually says that even a person with grave faults should be considered saintly if their focus is on Krishna. So this is a difficult concept for me to understand, looking at the upbringing that I've had, and being in a religious organization, and looking at different levels of leadership having troubles. So I want to bring up this concept of it's a three-dimensional focus that as individuals we can have, and as an organization we can have. The three dimensions are adho-mukha, which means looking below or looking within, and trayanga-mukha, which means forward-facing, looking towards, okay, what's the next step? What's in front of me? What's in front of our religious organization? And urdhva-mukha. Urdhva-mukha means looking upward. So this is a Vedic concept described in the Vedas, in the Upanishads, and it also comes into Vedic astrology. Individually, we all have a primary adho-mukha. Some people are focused within, focused downward, looking at situation that's relevant to me, to us, and some people are focused on, what do we do next? I want to get this fixed, I want to get that done. And then some people are focused on the urdhva-mukha, strategy for the movement, strategy for my life, big long-term goals, and so on and so forth. So in context of this verse, it's very important for us to integrate this principle of the three-dimensional focus. So if we reflect on this verse, Brahma's transcendental purpose, when we look at Krishna utilizing Brahma to achieve his purpose, we focus on inward. In other words, not focusing on the imperfection of Brahma, but to understand it. Whatever it is, Brahma is better than me. So that's like the inward focus. And there's a story that comes to mind about the Brahmana and the prostitute. They lived next door to each other. And the Brahmana was constantly engaged in spiritual activities, chanting, doing deity worship, reciting mantras, and the prostitute was engaged in her business. So every morning the Brahmana would wake up and take a peep at the prostitute and, oh, here she goes, another client, okay, here she goes. So he was constantly meditating upon the actions of the prostitute. And on the other hand, the prostitute was constantly peeping at the Brahmana. Oh, these mantras are so purifying. He's so fortunate to be focused on deity worship. And when will the day come when my focus can be on Krishna in this way? So she was constantly absorbed in the actions of the Brahmana. So a day arrived, the fateful day arrives when the day of judgment. So that brings up another Pandora box of judgment and justice and mercy here. So when the Yamadutas arrive, they come to the Brahmana and say, here we are to take you. He says, hey, wait a minute, you must be mistaken. This chariot, this airplane is not for me. That ride is for the lady next door. And they say, no, this is no mistake, because you have been so focused on the actions of the prostitute that you're going to get what she performed, and she's actually going to get the result of everything that you've performed. Hare Krishna. So now, how can focusing on Krishna's purpose help us overcome my tendency to fault find or condemn others? This is a question that each of us can answer individually. Then the second point about the O in the focus, F-O. O stands for the opposites that needs to be managed. Looking at this controversial section of Srimad Bhagavatam, difficult section, delicate section, I realized one thing, that from this philosophical conclusion of Srimad Bhagavatam, certain things are not problems to be solved, certain things are polarity to be managed. In other words, here we see, this is the Triangamukha concept that I'm bringing up here, that within and forward. Within first and then forward. And there is a beautiful verse composed by Madhvacharya in Sanskrit. It's a very difficult verse, and he really encapsulates this essence of how to perceive justice and mercy from the Krishna conscious perspective, from the Vaishnava perspective. And he goes, Srishti samhara leela vilasattatam pushta shadgunya sadvigrahollasinam dushta nishesha samhara karmodhyatam hrishta pushtanuti shishta praja samshrayam prinayamo Vasudevam Devata Mandala Khanda Mandanam. So this again explains the very intricate cosmic interplay, how Krishna organizes the macrocosm on the level of Srishti, Samhara, how he creates, how he maintains, how he strategizes, how the cosmic reality affects all the living entities. Dushtanisheshakar, so he also makes sure that he eliminates the wickedness in the hearts of the devotees. It doesn't say he eliminates the wicked in the sense of killing them. And in fact, Madhvacharya emphasizes how in Srimad Bhagavatam, there are so many demons that we come across. Everyone has their story. Everybody needs healing. Everybody's story shows how they were cursed with the wickedness. And the story represents the fact that Krishna's mercy and compassion and his interest in making them purify that. So there is nobody bad, like Prahlad Maharaj's focus. Everybody needs healing. And so that's the Triangamukha perspective of how to balance that act of Hrishta Pushtanuti Shishta Praja Samshrayam. How to manage the polarity between the justice and mercy, how to manage the polarity between two principles, both important. We cannot smash the other one in order to uphold one principle. So the basic principle here is Krishna's interventions in purifying even Brahmā. It addresses how he helps us in bringing things up, churning the pot of ISKCON, maybe the best we got, in human existence. I come from a Madhva Sampradaya, so when I look at ISKCON, I say, like, who has got the deity worship they've got? Nobody. Although, right, we get the principles of deity worship from the Madhvas, but if we look, 250 devotees, services go behind just Radha Madhava altar, picking flowers, decorating, and the dressing. And so this level of focus that we have, that we can take advantage of. So in the opposites to be managed, the polarity to be managed, purity over condemnation. In other words, what was the point? I wanted to actually put it in a... So we usually think that this is not pure and we get into condemnation. But actually the point is purity means focus on Krishna. Yeah, this is the point with the O. Purity represents, the main essence of purity is focus on Krishna. And so the question for us with the opposites for us individually is, how can we see Brahma's actions as Krishna's way of balancing justice and mercy for the universal harmony? Okay, then comes the clarity through dharma. So here, Brahma's role as the embodiment of transcendental sound and energy. So he's not an ordinary being. And as Madhvacharya here also says, he's in charge. Krishna empowers Brahma to preserve the spiritual wisdom, to maintain dharma. Unnata prarthita shesha samsadakam. Sannata laukika nandada shripadam. Madhvacharya says that to align to Krishna's will is the purpose. To align to Krishna's will is what brings us clarity. And the dharma, the point about dharma is Brahma's role as transcendental sound. It is to help him to perform his dharma. In other words, meditating on Krishna to help us align with our actions in spite of all the struggles that we have, internal and external. And the question for us would be, how can Krishna testing our humility, Krishna testing my patience, Krishna testing my tendency to fault find, how can I find clarity and at the same time fulfill my purpose, fulfill my dharma? Okay, then comes the Urdhva-mukha. The Urdhva-mukha concept comes with the U. The U is the upward focus, universal adaptability. I mean, our leaders have a very difficult task at hand. Most of our organization runs voluntary. It's very difficult to get qualified people. So in our movement, we have had many difficulties, mistakes. And the Urdhva-mukha perspective is when the leaders think, yes, this is what happened and this is what we need to do right now, but also what do we need to do in order to uphold the principles? Like, for example, two principles here, the two polarities to be managed could be, as an example, children need to be protected. Children need to be protected by all means. And then there is another principle, brahmanas need to be protected, sannyasis need to be protected, the elderly need to be protected. But what if there is a conflict with these two things in history? Then the Urdhva-mukha concept, where the leaders come about and say, okay, how do we make sure that one principle doesn't smash the other? How do we manage the polarity? So it's a very difficult task. So Krishna himself, I was just thinking how in this section, Krishna himself even puts at risk or takes such a risk to whole cosmic balance by prioritizing Brahma's purification. It's mind-blowing if I look at it in that way. So individually for me, how can Krishna's ways, how he's trying to adapt me to take my responsibilities and at the same time be flexible in that, how can I look at that from a bigger picture? How can I look at that? So to integrate all those three, that's the point number 5 comes focus, S. The S stands for Sri Krishna, the Supreme Lord's plan, providence. In the 7th canto, the Parikshit Maharaj starts questioning about partiality, and he says, how can Krishna side with the demigods? How can he always side with the demigods? Then that whole section opens up about the demon, the child born in a demoniac family, Prahlad. Then that proves the point that no, he's not biased, he's not partial towards the demigods. What he is trying to do is something higher. Vipramukyai sada vedavadonmukai. So Krishna's purpose is something very difficult to understand. Very difficult to understand, because the way Madhvacharya here actually speaks about the bhinna karma shaya prani samprerakam sannatim neti vidvatsumihi mamsitam. Karma. So the point about this comes also in the seventh canto about providence and purity, how Krishna has not just three-dimensional, but he has multi-dimensional approach to achieve many purposes with one pastime. Many purposes he achieves. So here, Krishna's actions can appear partial, like as Parikshit Maharaj gets very in the first chapter of the seventh canto. He's questioning, like, how can Krishna make this differentiation? And then later on, as the verses go by, and Shukadeva Goswami is explaining about Prahlad Maharaj and Hiranyakashipu, Yudhishthir Maharaj at one point says, I don't understand, how can a father be so abusive to the son? I just don't understand this. How can Hiranyakashipu be so atrocious towards Prahlad? And then that whole fifth chapter expands upon Prahlad getting into this point about partiality of Krishna. And then he says, external level, Prahlad Maharaj is doing his homework, so to speak. Shanda and Amarka, the teachers, are teaching him diplomacy, politics, morality, justice. And Prabhupada actually says that Prahlad Maharaj already knew these things. Like, how? How did he know these things before he went to school? And then it's explained by our Vaishnava acharyas how it's not that he knew in terms of the details. Like Prabhupada knew everything, but it doesn't mean Prabhupada knew perfect English grammar or perfect Spanish, or Spanish for that matter, but he knew the essence of the thing. So similarly, Prahlad Maharaj, 5-year-old boy, right? When the Shanda and Amarka ask him, my dear child, who taught you all these philosophies about Supreme God and all this? Please tell us, no? And Prahlad Maharaj, he knows diplomacy, within, and he's Kshatriya. He does not reveal that it's Narada Muni. If you read the beginning verses in the 5th chapter, he doesn't reveal it. But later, when he's talking to his schoolmates, he says it's Narada Muni. And when Hiranyakashipu also comes, and then he asks him, my dear child, we ask, my dear child, how was your day today in school, right? What's going on? And Prahlad Maharaj doesn't take the name of Narada Muni. He says, and Hiranyakashipu asks, how did you learn these things? Who taught you? He says, the Lord in my heart. Right? So here, Prahlad Maharaj, on the external level, he's doing his homework, okay, listening. But internally, he doesn't like this concept. What concept? The concept of friends and enemies. So he says, I don't like this thing. I don't like to see friends and enemies. And I was thinking how even personally I've seen when there are some controversial topics or controversial people, if I like that person, I might constantly look for people who like that person. And then the whole concept duality of friends and enemies come. And if I don't like somebody because that abuse is related to me somehow or another, or to my people, then that person, the condemnation mood immediately comes up. And then on the other hand, if it is somebody who had an abusive history and they are somewhat related to me, or I kind of like them and is injustice that why are they bringing this up in this way, then I might lean more towards forgiveness. So I was just thinking how this justice and forgiveness in the context of Prahlad Maharaj's teachings brings the thing that a devotee, this is very clear in the 5th chapter of 7th canto, that in order for us to make the right, in jurisprudence, like right justice, bring that thing, we need to be a devotee. And devotee means to not discriminate between friends and enemies. Only then can we actually bring justice. And this also connects with Mahabharata. We can see that there is the commission and the omission. Like Duryodhana and Dushyasan were commissioning the disrobing of Draupadi, whereas Bhishma and Drona, they sat there, omission, they were not getting involved. But both things are wrong. And it is important in the Urdhva-mukha perspective of looking upward, looking at the bigger picture. It is important to discriminate and see how do we balance these things. But in order to reach that, we need that to rise above friendship and, to rise above the dualities of Ichha, Dvesha, Samuttena, the duality. I like this person and therefore the justice that is done to them is unfair. I don't like that person because of this reason and they should be punished more. So I think, in conclusion, within our organization, if we could emphasize more training, if I can be more trained in Shastra, more trained in thinking about jurisprudence, justice and mercy, the proportionality of what kind of a crime, who is the person involved, and how, and in this case is Brahma. So we're talking about Brahma, we're talking about Indra, Indra's fall down, Brahma's fall down, Chandra's fall down. All these, in Bhagavatam, it's full of failures and redemption. But it's also about the compassion of the Lord. It's also about the perspective of integrating the Adho-mukha, looking within, the Trayanga-mukha, purposeful actions going forward, and the Urdhva-mukha, which is the divine vision or the bigger picture, to help us to align between our responsibilities, between our purity, and ultimately on focusing on Krishna in all circumstances. Okay, so these are some of the points. I'm going to pause here. If you have any questions, comments, please don't bring controversies. Yes.
Thank you, Sri Radha Govinda Mataji. I would like to just humbly offer a little something. This pastime that is going on of Brahmā and the attraction between man and woman, Srila Prabhupada said we must discuss, the fact that this attraction between man and woman is the thing that keeps us bound to this material world. And so we mustn't shy away from discussing these things. Otherwise, Prabhupada said, our movement will become weak. There's this tendency to hide, the bad stuff under the carpet and say, oh, no, and like that. But unless in our Vaishnava circles, we actually discuss things threadbare, and this is where loving, honest, healthy relationships come into the picture, where I can be vulnerable and share my weaknesses and receive wise guidance. That's the only way we are going to overcome this. Otherwise, it's going to be one more cycle of rebirth and the same thing again and again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mataji. It was mind-blowing trying to get everything into what you're saying about. But speaking about looking for the purification as the main factor, just some anartha in me which is questioning this. When Brahma has an anartha, or Brahma is going after his daughter, you're speaking about purification, and there's a lot of forgiveness being there. But when Parashuram's mother looked lustily at Gandharva, she's being beheaded, I somehow tend to feel that there is injustice to women. Could you make me think about it in a better way? Thank you.
Very good point. Anybody likes to address that, Mataji's point?
one point to remember in this history of Parashurama is that he knew that he had the capacity to fix that beheading. In other words, beheading was just a phase, it was not final. For ordinary human beings, of course, beheading is final. But in that special family, the beheading was only a stage in restoring harmony in the family, because the father had the capacity of making the mother resurrect. That's one consideration that we should keep in mind. Another consideration is that we have seen how Lord Brahma himself, it is described how he changes his bodies, and the Acharya says it changes his mentality, because obviously his body is much subtler than ours. So what is death? What is death penalty? We see in the 7th chapter of the 1st canto, when Krishna tells Arjuna, kill Ashwatthama, and then they just humiliate him, which for a kshatriya is like death. So this concept of capital punishment or death or beheading, it's a bit relative to the context.
Also, perhaps the point about motivation, intention also comes into play. Right?
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Mataji, has Brahma, I have a doubt, that is, Brahma has to accept another body, or accept another body with connected with the sexual life?
Sorry, connected with what?
With Brahma has to
change his body.
Accept his body. Is it connected with sex or?
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
When Brahma gave up his body, what does that mean basically? He's asking that. He gave up his body, that time means what? He's asking. So
see, changing body basically in this context means changing the mentality. To give up doing that, to give up that pattern, that tendency. That's my understanding. Yes, Prabhu, you have the mic.
Yes. Mataji, you explained one very important point, like the FOCUS, the U part, where one principle cannot overcome the other principle. So just recent, I don't want to mention any names, one case has come up where one party is like, it's like vendetta, it has become a vendetta. First he found the fault in another party, and then it has become a vendetta, and this another party is like old, and old person is like very close to old age, and it's like because of the vendetta this other party cannot practice even Krishna consciousness, not this, not this, not this. And how we understand that what is the justice being done, So this party is like, okay, may have done, may not have done that mistake, but this party has started a vendetta on that another party. So how do we understand then what is the justice being done, and how do we do the justice?
So do you mean to say that the restriction or the thing is coming from authorities?
Yes, he has influenced the authority. This party has influenced the authority, and now it's like a vendetta on the other party.
Okay. So you're saying that the authority was influenced in an unfair way?
Yes.
Okay. So the authority has the wrong information.
It can be, or it may be misinformation, or it may be manipulation, anything, but basically we see the punishments being given to this other party is like no Krishna consciousness. Literally he cannot practice anyhow. Not this, not that, and the restrictions have been piling up. So how do we understand that the justice is being provided to this party?
Oh, we cannot understand. It's not.
Cannot.
It's very difficult, right? Yes, Prabhuji can answer that.
I don't know this case, really I have no imagination of what you're talking about. Obviously, whatever restrictions there may be, I don't think we can take it literally that he cannot practice Krishna consciousness, because anybody can chant Hare Krishna, anybody can read the books and so many other things, worship at home and so many other things, donate, give charity, distribute prasada. So there are hundreds and thousands of things that even the most punished person can do. But if I may, I would like to invite Champakalata Devi, who has been serving as the global world universal director of the Child Protection Office, and now she serves as, what's exactly your office name? I always forget.
Justice.
Yeah, she is the Justice Minister of ISKCON. So if she feels like, of course she is in vacation now, but if she feels like to say something
Please.
about justice, we have the Justice Minister right with us today.
Exactly.
And she's also, of course, a professional trained lawyer.
Thank you so much. And I must say that the class firstly has been very, very well presented. As you know, you correctly identified the polarity that exists between justice and mercy. And it's often a very challenging task to find that balance, because the complainant or the victim has been aggrieved. And, you know, we have to consider the impact that abuse might have had on this particular victim. And that particular victim wants a recourse, wants some sort of vindication. And yet, on the other hand, we have an offender who may be, you know, maintaining his innocence or her innocence. And we are challenged with the fact that, and as you're pointing out, and I've been thinking about this, we have, you spoke about the three, you know, looking inwards, looking, you know, above, and how to fix things, solutions. And, you know, when you bring all these elements together, and then in law we have the objective test, where when you want to be objective and independent and impartial, but at the same time you have all these factors that need to be taken into consideration. So we want to give the offender, we obviously want to, for the victim, for her to feel vindicated, and I'm using the gender, you know, just a female, but we also acknowledge that there are many others that are vulnerable, including, you know, Prabhus that could be vulnerable as well. And then we have the situation where the offender, as Prabhu was mentioning, Kanteya Prabhu was mentioning, there's so many ways one can still engage in devotional service whilst there are restrictions. But of course we have, you know, in the legal systems, we say when we are formulating what would be an appropriate, and I put it in inverted comma, sentence, we should take into consideration the seriousness of the offense, the interests of society. And when we speak of society, is that society would be looking, and here in this context would be ISKCON and the devotee community of devotees, looking to a ministry or an office like the Child Protection Office or the Leadership Misconduct Office, looking to these offices and agencies to address the situation. So when they look to these offices, we have to consider the interests of our community of devotees as well as the interests of the parties involved as well. So it is, and then the third point is the aspect of, you know, what is the objectives? It's deterrence, so individual, to deter that particular individual from reoffending. Send a message to other potential offenders that if you do something like this, this is going to be the consequence, so deter them from even doing such a thing. And then there's punishment, you know, and there is rehabilitation. Rehabilitation is very difficult because in the sense of, for instance, child abuse, how do you rehabilitate an abuser? So therein we also need to draw into the professional sphere of devotees within our community, psychologists, risk assessments being done, etc. So we have a duty to protect our community. We also have a duty, which we cannot shy away from acknowledging, like in the instance of, you know, Lord Brahmā here, that these are devotees that we are dealing with. So striking that balance is very difficult, and you're never going to please everybody, but all we can do is with a good conscience. You know, like the point you brought about when you first started the class is like, let's try and leave our own personal agendas out of it. And let's focus on how we can best serve in this capacity. I'm not sure if I've answered the question, but coming back to what you were raising is, you know, whoever's the decision maker should actually listen to both sides of the story. And I think that's important. And it all comes back down to the skills. You spoke of training. Training of how to assess information. And now not to be swayed unnecessarily, to keep that kind of balance in mind. I think all of that is in the training that is offered. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Actually, Mataji's share makes me realize how the qualified devotees, when they have the perspective of putting together, you know, jurisprudence and Krishna conscious philosophy, that's a different level of community we can build on the sattva guna level, something sustainable. Sometimes we get overcome by emotions. No, so then we look at a situation with emotions and we don't consider all these very brilliant points that Mataji made. So I think that, again, I will emphasize training on the Shastra level, training on the legal level, and not to try to take the law in our own hands and mess things up in the organization. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yes, Prabhu. One more and then we can end.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Mataji, I very often hear about this justice and mercy problem, challenge. But if we see in Varanasi...
I like how you immediately switched from problem to challenge. That's the spirit. Thank you.
So, but if we see the Varanasi system, Mataji, we have everything there. All the guidelines are there. Like a Brahmana, woman, children, cows, and these things, they should be given protection. And similarly, we have guidance for everything. So, is this challenge because we don't have Varanasi system properly established in our institution? Is this because of that?
Well, interesting you bring up that, because I was just reading that in Manu Samhita, for instance, they have justice depending on the varnas. So if, for example, a Shudra steals something, he gets 8-fold punishment. And if the Vaishya steals the same thing, he gets 16-fold of the punishment. And if the Kshatriya steals that thing, he gets, how much is that? 32-fold. And then if the Brahmana steals, he gets 64-fold punishment. So depending on the Varna, the punishments would be there. For example, if a Shudra insults a Brahmana, right, his tongue should be cut off. Okay? So in that case, the Shudra gets the heavy punishment. Whereas a Brahmana, if he offends another Brahmana, he doesn't get the punishment because his peers. So I'm not giving this as an example to say that that's what we should do. I'm just saying that there are certain things that cannot be applied in a practical situation. Go cut the tongue of somebody or so on and so forth. Prabhu has something to add.
We also have to understand that ultimately justice, when properly applied, is a form of mercy.
Justice, when properly applied, is a form of mercy. Correct.
Because everybody benefits.
Correct.
The perpetrator clears his or her karma, and society gets a message. The victim, it's easy for the victim to bring closure to the experience. Like Srila Prabhupada says, now death penalty, I know nowadays it's a controversial thing because we have to see how qualified are the judges and so on. But Srila Prabhupada often says that the death penalty for a murderer is actually mercy. When the king kills the murderer, it's actually good for the murderer, because if it's not punished, that murderer will go to hell. But if it gets punished by the king, all his sins are removed. And sometimes Srila Prabhupada says, he may even go to Svarga Loka. So let's not forget the properly applied justice is also a form of mercy.
Properly applied justice is a form of mercy. I like that quote. Sri Devi Mataji.
I'm really grateful that this discussion is coming up because our institution will suffer the results of improper actions and our children will be blaming us and their grandchildren and so on. So we have a very important legacy to pass on to the next generation. And as you rightly said, training and understanding, and exactly what that young gentleman there, that Prabhu said, we don't have an ashram. We don't have qualified Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras, Brahmanas. Now, thanks to Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada said, I've come to give you a head to the society. Another thing is, because there is no training, we're infected with this, Kali Yuga spirit, where we mollycoddle criminals and we abuse the victims more. You didn't do this right, you didn't do that right, it's your karma, and so on. So this is something we must guard against, because we will pay the price. Whatever we do in this life, in whatever position we are, we will pay the price. And if you take a responsibility and do not discharge it correctly, you have to pay a heavier price than if you had not taken the responsibility at all. So there's a very perfect system of judgment in Yamaraja's court. Everything is being. So that's just what I wanted to say, that we are all called upon to become very introspective and really follow Srila Prabhupada's instructions to make this institution something that we can happily hand over to the next generation.
Thank you so much. That's a perfect ending to the discussion today. Thank you very much for your attention. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Srila Prabhupada.